Welcome to Rachel and Ralph's Reality Check, where us two former political insiders give you the scoop on everything, honestly, and without anybody telling us what to say. Ralph is a contributor to Newsmax, I'm a contributor to Townhall and other publications, and today we're going to talk about, first of all, what's going on in Arizona with cattle rustling. It's become a real big problem. That's where I live. And then we're going to talk about a column that Ralph wrote about supply side economics, what's going on right now under the Biden administration. And then we're going to follow up with our blue collar blues segment. What's going on right now with defunding the police? So to open, I wrote an article for Townhall and other sites this past week about cattle rustling in Arizona. You know, you would think that being a red state, we wouldn't have problems like this on the right. You'd think problems like that would be minimal, but no. You know, the cattle ranchers are predominantly Republicans, and we've got a Republican governor and a Republican legislature. So what's happened? Well, as some of these old cowboys tell me, basically some lobbyists, one of them, the name, let me give you guys the name, Boss Aha, who's the lobbyist for the Cattle Feeders Association. He and some other lobbyists got the laws changed in Arizona. So no longer did these inspectors go out and inspect cattle personally when they were being sold. Instead, there's kind of an honor system now where you can just, you know, say that these were your cattle that were being sold, and you can take pictures and give them to these inspectors. As a result of it, in the last few years, there have been 3,000 head of cattle stolen from over 32 people, and nothing is being done about it. If you complain to the head of the Department of Agriculture here, a guy named Mark Killian, he says, oh, we're not doing any investigation, and I don't investigate rumors. So what do we need to do about this problem, and why isn't anything being done? Well, unfortunately, as many of you know, under Governor Doug Ducey's administration, a lot of corruption has been swept under the rug. And while I think for the most part, Ducey's a good person, there are some things that for whatever reason, he is not looking into. And so we're hoping by creating a public awareness of this, that things will finally change, and you know, maybe fire this guy who's the head of Department Agriculture. So,
all right,
but Ralph.
Rachel, just, you know, I know I'm an old Jack Kemp bleeding heart conservative, so I'm just asking you to consider the possibility that they just didn't notice, and that the cattlemen did not systematically make these injuries known to the administration, and that this was not a matter of sweeping corruption under the rug, and it's not a matter of malfeasance. It's often just a time of the fact that the authorities just did not get the word. Believe it or not, governors are not X-Men superheroes. And I am big on the idea of citizen participation. And Rachel, you and I met at the tea parties, and we saw how powerful a mobilized citizenry can be. So, and I've talked to many different civic groups over the years, including Hispanic pastors, and my beat goes on no matter who I'm talking to, and that is, your elected officials are not going to care any more than you make them care. And so it just, okay, you're telling me 32 cattlemen have experienced the loss of 3,000 cattles, whatever you cowgirls call them, over the past 10 years or however many years it was. I don't know how much a cow brings at market. Is it $100? Is it $1,000? It sounds to me like it's quite possible that the authorities think that they've got better things to do with their time. And I'm in total agreement with you. If we can generate enough citizen pressure, then the steps will be taken to make sure that law enforcement is done. I'm not horrified that we're not sending people out in this era of in this digital era where, okay, I don't know exactly what a cattle inspector does, but it would save the taxpayer money to Zoom the cows, as opposed to have to have them drive out onto some ranch 5 hours away from the nearest city. So that may not have proved out in practice to be all that good. It may be that, there needs to be more energy put down on it. But just let me remind you that there's a famous untrue story, fake news, but it was based on real news, about a bunch of activists who went in to see President Franklin Delano Roosevelt. Now, I have it from an insider that it was really probably activists going in to see a very famous mayor of New York City, and it just got adapted to say FDR because he was more famous. Okay, but and they pleaded their case about what they wanted the government to do, and Roosevelt looked at them and said, "You've persuaded me. I want to do it. Now make me do it." So to me, the missing link is often either apathetic or misguided citizens who just think that our elected officials are somehow superheroes with superpowers who can read their minds and then make sure and go out and get truth, justice, and the American way done by changing the course of mighty rivers, bending steel in their bare hands, leaping over skyscrapers. No, we need to tell them what we want them to do. We want to persuade them that they want to do it. And then we have to make them do it because there's a lot of cross pressures on them. And if we don't show our passion and our consistent commitment to the cause in an ongoing, steady, and reasonable way, not as a bunch of torch and pitchfork carrying mobs, but as a bunch of concerned citizens, then I'm much less I'm much less bitter than a lot of my conservative and populist friends are that the government isn't doing what they want it to do. I've made the government do the right thing. It was a lot of work. You've made the government do the right thing. It was a lot of work, but you know what? This is a republic. It's not a democracy. A republic means a representative democracy where the citizens send people to do their will, and it's up to us, the citizens, to remain engaged and let our elected officials know not only what our will is, but what their priorities should be. And if we don't do that, shame on us, not shame on them.
Well, I like how you look at this very practically and very optimistically. You're saying, okay, well, there needs to be a certain level of protest and complaints until a lot of officials will react. And it's annoying that it's taken this level, but there's some truth to that, and that seems to be how this is working out. And I will tell you, since my column came out, I've been told by inside sources that Governor Ducey is very upset about it. So that means he's probably about to do something. And I've heard that this horrible Department of Agriculture, who's turned the other eye, may be out of there. Ducey may get rid of him within the next 2 to 3 weeks.
Well, I really hate to see. I don't know any of the facts except for what I read in your wonderful scoop of a column. Okay, but I also believe in a really old-fashioned, out of fashion thing called the presumption of innocence. Okay, and just based upon what a couple of people have told you, reliable sources. I'm not criticizing what you say, but one of the things I've discovered as a lawyer and as a columnist and many years of being engaged, there's two sides to every story. And I would very much like to see a thoroughgoing, fair-minded, comprehensive look into finding out what the allegations are, what the evidence is. I hate to see a civil servant or a bureaucrat, as you like to put it, lose their job based upon upset and allegations. I believe that he should be considered innocent until proven guilty, and it should be looked at in a thoroughgoing way by the governor or by the attorney general or by whatever authorities are appropriate. They should take their time, take a deep breath, and maybe he's perfectly innocent. Maybe he just thought this was rumors. Maybe he didn't believe. Maybe the cattle ranchers did not provide him with enough hard evidence to persuade him that this is an underfunded department. Rachel,
But there's 32 cattle ranchers that have complained. And,
yes, over how long.
And the reason I didn't put the other side in my story as much is because, I'm limited in my articles to how many words I can write. There was only room for 1,000 articles. And this is one of the worst times I have ever had chopping an article down to 1,000 articles. I was literally calling up cattle ranchers at the last minute saying,
I'm sure you did a
I
great
can't
job.
fit it all in.
I'm not criticizing you. I know you did a great job. I was the one who called you up and complimented you on the column. I'm just saying that an 800-word column is the starting gun for a, for action. It's not judge, jury, and executioner. And so I'm glad that your column got the attention of the authorities. And I hope that Governor Ducey, who's a businessman, right? Wasn't he the ice cream guy? I mean, he's a collateral victim of this because, hey, if people are stealing cows, it's going to drive up the price of milk, which is going to drive up the price of ice cream. So he probably takes this very personally. So I'm just saying that I'm just hoping that you're right. You were under constraints, and it's not your job to investigate this. You got a scoop. It's now their job to investigate it before they decide what actions are appropriate.
All right, well, that's probably enough on that. I am looking forward to moving on to your column, which addressed supply side economics, because you discuss a book that was written by one of my late brother's closest friends, and you didn't even know that until I told you today.
You know that? So you told me just before the show started.
So tell us about this book and supply side economics.
Okay, well, first of all, I'm one of the few living remaining OG, that stands for original gangster, supply siders that go back to the Jack Kemp era, even pre-Reagan. Okay, so I was a very junior member of this group, but I was a real honest to God member of it, and an active member of it, and an effective member of it. First starting in Albany, New York, where I was the Capital District Chairman of Citizens for America. I was a young, freshly minted lawyer, and somebody told me to read Jude Wanniski's book, The Way the World Worked. We were going through economic hell of a 20% misery index with Jimmy Carter as president, and he was a good man, but a complete nincompoop when it came to economic policy, except for when it came to deregulating the beer industry, because he started the deregulation that have led to the renaissance of the craft beer industry. So every time you raise up a craft beer from one of these boutique breweries, you need to hoist a toast to Jimmy Carter.
You know what? I don't think Southern Baptists are going to like anything about the guy, because they're not even going to like that. And he was a Southern Baptist.
Yeah. Anyway, so he deregulated beer, but on the inflation side, he had no idea what to do, and he admitted it. He gave speeches saying, "I don't know what to do. Turn down your thermostat. Carpool." It was just nobody knows what causes inflation. I've read the transcripts. I've watched the videos, and I cringed. I've written columns about this. In fact, every really a good economist worth his salt, like say Milton Friedman or Robert Mundell, knew exactly what was causing inflation. It was the Fed was printing too many dollars in regard to the amount of demand for those dollars in the marketplace. And when you're flooding the market with more dollars than there's demand for the dollars, then you get the value. The value of everything is determined by supply and demand. Too much supply, not enough demand. The value of the dollar goes down. That's called depreciation. The prices that reflects as all prices going up. We call that inflation. Okay, and there were two economists who were very respected, Bob Mundell and Arthur Laffer. Bob Mundell was more senior, who basically said, no, the pop Keynesian mix of a soggy dollar and high tax rates is exactly backwards. In order to get the economy going again, in order to get the misery index down from 20 to nothing, in order to create jobs, in order to keep prices from going up, what we need to do is have the Fed stabilize the dollar, and we need to cut marginal tax rates. At that time, the top rate was 70%. And their buddy, propagandist, journalist, cahoots guy, Jude Wanniski, was going from office to office on Capitol Hill, pitching this to various Republican congressmen. And Jack Kemp, who was as he liked to say it, a phys ed major from Occidental College, who became famous as a championship quarterback for the Buffalo Bills, then ran for Congress, but he was a backbencher. He wasn't doing anything interesting. He said, "Oh my God, this is great. I'm going to grab this. I'm going to crusade on it." So Jack said, we're going to we're going to reduce marginal tax rates. We're going to cut tax rates across the board, not cut taxes, cut tax rates by 10%, by 30% for everybody. Rich, poor, everybody gets the same percentage-wise tax cut. It was called, he recruited Senator Roth, and it became known as Kent Roth. And we need to stabilize the dollar. He introduced the Gold Standard Act of 1984. He was a gold standard kind of guy, but that gold standard is one means of keeping the dollar from depreciating and keeping prices from going up if you do it right. And Jack knew how to do it right. He was advised by my mentor, Louis Lehrman, who was in turn had the mentor of Jacques Rueff, who was de Gaulle's economic wizard and was one of the great gold standard economists of the late 20th century. So the point here being is the establishment hated it. Art Laffer was the first chief economist for OMB working in the Nixon administration. He was actually at Camp David on August 15th when Nixon closed the gold window. And so he still, a story about him, how he still has the windbreaker that they gave to all the people who were at Camp David, George Shultz and Paul Volcker and all of those big kahunas to create the Nixon shock. Well, the fact is that they rolled out they packaged this all together, and eventually Jude Wanniski's economist, Alan Reynolds, heard some other economists talk about this as supply side fiscalism. I think it might have been Herb Stein. And Jude said, great, we're just going to change that from supply side fiscalism to supply side economics. And boom, we were off and running. But people forget that the establishment hated the idea of cutting marginal tax rates and fought us tooth and nail and ridiculed us. I'm including myself, even though I was a junior member, because I was part of that. As the Republicans, George H.W. Bush in particular, called this voodoo economics. And the Democrats called it trickle-down economics, which was really stupid because the phrase trickle-down economics was coined by the humorist Will Rogers to tease and ridicule President Herbert Hoover, the guy who was the president of the Depression and who all we supply-siders used as our whipping boy, our poster child for stupid economic policy. So calling us trickle-down when that was coined for Herbert Hoover, our archenemy, was just totally ignorant, but I wasn't around there at the right time.
And yet nobody really cares about it being a negative connotation. I hear people use trickle-down economics all the time, even on the right.
Well, they should cut it out because it sounds condescending. That said, there was it caught on. The idea of we delegated stabilizing the dollar to Paul Volcker, who was appointed by Jimmy Carter, but didn't feel the president had his back until Reagan was inaugurated. And then he began to raise interest rates and tighten the money supply. It was agony, but it killed inflation. And then as soon as the inflation was wrung out of the system, and as soon as the Reagan, Kemp, Roth tax cuts were enacted, because Reagan's people hated it. They hated these tax cuts. They fought it tooth and nail, so they delayed them and they diluted them, but Jack wouldn't let them off the hook.
And they hated it because they thought the Democrats would label them as caring about the rich, correct?
Actually, there's an ironic story about that. They hated it because they were contaminated by neo-Keynesian, pop Keynesianism, and they thought that this would they thought this would be inflationary instead of anti-inflationary, and they thought that this would cause massive budget deficits, which it did the opposite, actually. So it turned out the Democrats got really excited about this, and they outcompeted us. So Dan Rostenkowski, a Chicago Democrat who was chairman of the House Ways and Means Committee, later got indicted in the House postal scandal or whatever, but he was a good guy. I'm sorry to say. Yeah, we all mess up once in a while. But he dropped the top tax rate.
But okay.
He dropped the top tax rate immediately from 70 to 50%, which was far more than Jack or Reagan dared, because they were afraid that they'd be painted as shills for the rich. It was Rostenkowski who did that, And you know who voted for it in the United States?
Joe Biden. I've been reading.
Senator Joe Biden. Okay. And then Bill Bradley, basketball star, and Dick Gephardt, a good labor Democrat, said, hey, this is really good stuff. Look at what's doing in the economy. It's creating jobs like, once it was phased in, creating jobs like crazy. Let's drop the top tax rate from 50 to 28%. And and you know who voted to drop the top tax rate in 1986 from 50 to 28%?
Biden again.
Senator Joe Biden. Senator Joe Biden was a darn good supply sider in the heyday. And I believe in his heart of hearts, he knows he did the right thing. And if the Republicans come out with the right kind of package, which is across the board, something for everybody, not just, corporations and rich people and blah, 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 blah. If it's something that is as beneficial to us working folks as it is for the investors, I think we could probably turn Joe Biden. And you know what? I'm not the only one who thinks that. The hard left is secretly, I read their literature, so I know what they're telling each other, is open secretly hysterical that Biden is going to turn and that his pragmatic conservative supply side is going to come to the fore. So the Jacobins and the people to the left of AOC, they're all going nuts because they're afraid that Joe Biden is a secret supply sider. So I'm not saying he is. I'm just saying that the left is anxious that he is, and he was in the day. So let me just wrap this up. On November 29th, when Reagan declared for the presidency, the Dow Jones Industrial Average was 814. Okay. It's now under a supply side structure, 34,000. Okay. Per capita real GDP, meaning how much you make a year, how much I make a year, in 1979 was $30,000. Now, under the supply side regime that's been watered down, but it's still in place, it's $60,000. People are making twice as much thanks to supply side, thanks to voodoo economics, and thanks to trickle down economics, and thanks to Ronald Reagan, and thanks to Joe Biden.
Well, so, I just have 2 points to make, and because I know we need to move on to our final segment soon. First of all, every time you mention Jacobin, it just reminds me of one of my best April Fool's jokes I've ever done, which was this past year on Facebook, where I said, Jacobin just hired me to start writing about politics and religion. And you would not believe all the people who were like, congratulations, that's so exciting.
Hey, I'm a paid subscriber to Jacobin. It's a brilliant magazine. Listen, I'm not interested in reading the National Review because I'm not interested in reading people who I agree with. I like the challenge. I like smart people who are willing to, who are willing to give me an alternative perspective. I'm not persuaded, but I'm very excited by the opportunity to hear what the other side has to say. And congratulations, Rachel, on by being hired by one of my favorite magazines, Jacobin.
Only like
all of this.
Only like one person actually like looked them up and came back and like accused me of being a fraud or a sellout.
April Fools.
And my other point was, I know you're hopeful that Biden is going to revert to, his behavior back then again now, but I think the Democrat Party has moved way too far to the left since the 1980s, and I don't see them getting over the congressional hurdles, the far left Pelosi's. I don't think they would ever agree to across the board, same rate for taxes. I don't see it happening.
Well, it won't. What happens in Congress is what we make happen in Congress. And the fact is that Pelosi is center left. She's not hard left. Okay. You could look it up. She has been putting down AOC since about the day after AOC got sworn in as too far left. I'm just telling you, if we make it happen, it will happen. And if we don't make it happen, it won't happen. We, the citizens, have to step up and make our voices heard by making intelligent, consistent arguments so that the people on Capitol Hill know what the folks back home want. And as long as they're just sitting home watching YouTube, Yes, I'm talking to you, Mr. or Mrs. Viewer, instead of making their voices heard by calling up, writing real letters on paper, much better than email and emailing and getting their friends to do that too. You know, if they could get 10 like-minded people together to to keep the pressure, friendly pressure on their congressman on issues like taxes uh, or creating a path to citizenship for the illegal alien, for the undocumented aliens, or other good conservative causes, you would be shocked at how quickly we could make them take a hard right turn.
All right. Well, I'll end that by just saying, just wait till you read my article that comes out tonight at midnight. Well, it's on inflation.
All
Okay.
right.
Moving to our last segment, the blue collar blues. I want to hear what you think is going on, Ralph, right now with the defund the police movement, because you said some interesting things to me earlier, and I'm just wondering, I heard last night that here in the city of Phoenix, we are down 1,400 to 1,500 police officers. And who does that hurt the most? That hurts people in high crime neighborhoods. So this has just gone way too far. But go ahead and tell our viewers what you said earlier that made me stop and think.
Oh, this is the blowback that the Democrats are getting for, shall we say, conniving at this issue is horrendous, and they know it. Crime is up dramatically in this country over the last year. It's up in some cases by 40 or 50%. And it's just like you say, it's not the rich people who live in gated communities who are victimized by this. It's working people like you and me who live, in who live on the other side of the tracks. And so even in New
I
York
live in the middle of Phoenix.
Okay,
Down
good.
in the middle of Phoenix.
Okay, fine. You're somewhere in between. You're
No,
somewhere in
no,
between.
this is not. I mean, I don't live in a ghetto neighborhood or anything, but this is far from a nice neighborhood. I mean, we're talking inner city.
Yeah, okay. And that's, by the way, the politically correct term for it. We don't call it ghetto anymore. We call it the inner city. So yeah, I get it. I get it. And the Democrats, the regular look, there are two kinds of members of any political party. There are the party regulars and there are the activists. Okay, the Democratic activists have a disproportionate amount of power in the Democratic Party because the media leans left and tends to want to encourage the lunatic fringe who are doing things like saying defund the police. But look, in the last presidential election, the actual party voters stampeded to the most pragmatic, the most conservative candidate that was offered to them out of the 17 lunatics that were in. There were 16 lunatics and there was Joe Biden. Guess what? Everybody thought, oh, Joe Biden, old and feeble and whatever. And he opened up a can of what on the Bernie Bros and on Liz Warren and on all of those, nutsy Fagans there. Okay. And the defund the police sort of was pushed. Remember how I said, if we push our elected officials and our candidates, they will go where we're pushing them. The left understands that better than the right. And so the activists pushed their candidates, but the primary voters voted for the most sensible of all of the candidates, because the party is not like that. That represents the extreme fringe. Teddy Roosevelt said any progressive cause will always generate a lunatic fringe. That's where we get the phrase lunatic fringe from Teddy Roosevelt, who is something of a lunatic himself, but he's up there on Rushmore.
So you think then that this defund the police movement might actually start dying away? Because
It's going to do one of two things, Rachel. It's already doing it. It's either going to die off, and by the way, it's not dying off of its own accord. It's not like Brood 10 of the cicadas. It's being strangled by the Democratic leadership, who recognize that this is political poison, and if they don't strangle it in its cradle, that they are going to pay bigly in the 2022 election. So one of two things is going to happen. They're either going to they're going to kill off this nonsense politically, not physically. And they're just not going to tolerate. They're going to shove defund the police outside the Overton window and not let people go around talking about it because it's just politically suicidal. Or if they don't succeed in doing that, they're going to have one of the biggest setbacks in history next year, and the Republicans are going to be taking a possibly a veto-proof majority in both the House and the Senate. Not likely. I'm not predicting it, but if they don't get this nonsense under control, could happen.
Well, that's fascinating to hear, Ralph, because if you read the mainstream media, which I do all day long because that's part of my main jobs right now, all it is about race issues, just nonstop. But if they really are going to, cut out this defunding the police aspect, that would be amazing.
And by the way, I'm all for public discourse and political engagement and civic engagement on race issues. Okay, America has made extraordinarily heroic progress on race issues, and I applaud making Juneteenth a national holiday, but we still have a long ways to go. And I am thrilled that we are doing it. I want the Republicans to do more of it. But defunding the police is not a race issue. It's a demagogic issue that hurts people of color more than it hurts privileged Karens like you.
Excuse me. I'm about to write a column about what the left is doing by coming up with that word Karen. What they're doing is they're labeling white females that as a way to discredit them. And every time they want to label me that, I'm going to go, okay, so let's see, I'm part Portuguese. And when I was in 7th grade, a guy made fun of my looks and called me Neanderpack because of my ethnicity. So you're going to try to call me a Karen? Oh, but trust me, they'll come for, women of various ethnicities next who are on the right. I mean, they're coming for all of us. You white guys, you were just.
Oh man, Rachel, you so rose to my bait. You are not a Karen. You know I don't think you're a Karen.
Oh, but women hate that.
Some of my best friends are named Karen, and they are furious at having their name turned into a pejorative. So I teased you, you reacted. Thank you, very gratifying. But I didn't mean a word of it.
Oh, all right. Well, we should wrap up the show. Thank you everybody for watching, and tune in next week when Ralph and I go head to head on inflation under Biden.
Thank you. See ya.